What happens when a cop tells a black woman in a pantsuit to sit on the ground like a criminal, not knowing she's one of the most powerful judges in the state? What if she stayed calm, but didn't stay silent? And when the system tried to ignore her, what did she do next? If this story moves you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that speak the truth. The lake shimmered dark and restless under the midnight sky. Veronica Hayes, still wrapped in the residue of polite applause and professional handshakes, guided her Lexus along Lakeshore Drive like she'd done 100 nights before. The conference badge still dangled from her dashboard. Her navy blue pantsuit, creased just slightly from the long evening, held its shape with the same dignified restraint she wore on the bench. Her heels, kicked off the moment she closed her car door, lay in the back seat. Flats now cushioned her tired feet. The streets were quiet this late, except for the low sweep of wind coming in from the lake. She exhaled slowly, thinking of the closing line from her keynote speech: "Justice is only real if it extends beyond the courtroom." Then headlights flared, bright, too close. No siren. In her rearview mirror, she saw a patrol car or something that resembled one. Blacked out. No markings. No license number she could make out. It had appeared without warning, now hugging her bumper like a threat. Her pulse didn't spike, not yet. Veronica was a judge. She knew how to navigate this. She reached calmly for the signal and pulled over near a side turnout by the lake. Then she turned on her dome light, folded her hands neatly on the wheel, and waited. The door behind her opened, slammed. Footsteps. Then a figure, white male, mid-40s, close-cut blonde hair, tall, rigid, belt weighed down with gear. His flashlight snapped up, beam slicing into her face. No greeting. No badge presented, just one clipped command: "Step out of the vehicle, now." Her voice stayed even. "Officer, may I ask the reason for this stop?" He barely paused. "You matched a description, someone suspicious in the area." Suspicious. She blinked. Her judicial ID, bar number, and vehicle registration sat clearly visible on the passenger seat. He didn't glance at them. A jogger passed on the opposite sidewalk, earbuds in. He slowed, looked, then looked away. Kept going. Veronica's hands remained on the wheel, not trembling, not yet. This wasn't standard procedure, not even close. It wasn't a traffic stop anymore. It was something else, something colder, and it had nothing to do with law. Veronica Hayes had spent 2 decades behind the bench, and a decade before that arguing in front of one. She'd prosecuted hardened criminals, calmed down frantic defendants, and watched seasoned lawyers crack under pressure. She had ruled on cases that bent the law toward justice and cases that revealed just how elastic justice could be. And through it all, she never raised her voice. Not once. Tonight had been no different. At the Illinois State Criminal Justice Reform Forum, she delivered the keynote with her usual quiet precision. Words measured but weighty. Her message, "The system doesn't need polishing, it needs rewiring," had earned a standing ovation. Even some of the younger prosecutors looked at her like they were seeing the bench not as a weapon, but a responsibility. Now, less than an hour later, she sat in the driver's seat of her car, headlights still flaring behind her, a white officer demanding her compliance without cause. Her ID gleamed faintly on the passenger seat. Next to it, a small photo of her and Samuel, her late husband, taken the year he retired from the fire department. In the corner pocket of the glove box was the bronze nameplate from her very first courtroom. She kept it not for pride, but as a reminder. Power meant nothing if it didn't protect people. Veronica glanced in the side mirror. The officer was still standing stiff, his hand too close to his hip. No request for her license. No explanation. No identification. Maybe he's just new, she told herself. Maybe this is just bad training, poor judgment, nerves. But the words felt hollow even as she thought them. She'd seen this play out before, in the transcripts of wrongful stops, in the depositions of women who'd been silenced, in the eyes of grieving mothers who never got answers. Her law professor's words came back in sharp relief. The robe doesn't always protect you. Your skin still walks in first. And tonight, she wasn't Judge Hayes. She was just a black woman on the side of the road. No courtroom, no gavel, just gravel and silence. She was 12 when it happened. It was a Thursday morning in early spring, and her father had left for work the same way he always did, riding his beat-up Schwinn 10 speed, his lunch pail bungee corded to the back. He was a maintenance supervisor at a private school across town, and the bike was his preferred commute, even when their used Buick was available. Said it cleared his head. That day, he never made it past the corner. Veronica had been tying her shoelaces by the window when the cruiser rolled up. 2 officers, one black, one white. They stopped him just outside their lawn. No questions, just orders. He didn't argue. Her father wasn't the arguing type, but when he reached into his jacket for his work ID, they cuffed him anyway. Said he fit the description. From behind the lace curtains, Veronica had watched her father kneel on their own grass while neighbors peered over hedges and fences, pretending to water plants, pretending not to gawk. Her mother stood in the doorway. Silent, except for one breathless sentence she murmured like a prayer. The badge doesn't always mean safety for us, it can mean target. They let him go an hour later. No charges, no explanation, but the damage was already done. That night she heard the shift in his voice when he said grace at dinner. How he paused longer than usual, like he was searching for something to believe in. Veronica didn't sleep. Instead, she opened her father's toolbox, found a yellow legal pad and a cracked blue pen and wrote a single sentence over and over. I will learn the rules they break. She didn't know then what it meant, not exactly, but the seed was planted. Now, decades later, that same weight pressed behind her ribcage as she stood beside her car under cold streetlights. Her father's face, ashamed, gentle, unjustly humiliated, flashed in her memory like it had happened last week. Only this time it wasn't him kneeling on the lawn. It was her, standing on gravel, and the story was starting all over again. The gravel beneath Veronica's flats bit into her soles, but she didn't move. Her hands stayed at shoulder height, open, steady, visible. The patrol car's headlights poured harsh white light across her, casting long, distorted shadows that made her look more like a suspect than a citizen. Officer Radford hadn't budged from his stance. His hand hovered a breath too close to the butt of his holstered weapon. His chest rose and fell with practiced intimidation. "Sit on the curb," he barked. "Now." Veronica blinked slowly. Her voice came out even but unwavering. "I'm not under arrest. I will not sit on the ground like a criminal." That seemed to push him. He stepped back, pressed the mic on his shoulder, and muttered into his radio. "Uncooperative female, possibly armed, requesting backup." The words slammed against the night like gunshots. Veronica's jaw tightened. That phrase, possibly armed, wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a trigger, a narrative. She could see it forming. A woman alone, allegedly combative. Suspicious. The story that got people killed. 3 minutes passed in silence, then tires crunched against pavement. 2 more squad cars slid into place, engines humming, lights pulsing red and blue. From the first, a young officer stepped out, barely 30, eyes darting, uncertain. The second cruiser held a female officer with a tight braid and unreadable face. Radford didn't pause. She refused lawful orders, won't identify, won't comply. Veronica raised her chin and spoke clearly, her voice carrying over the hum of the engines. "I'm Judge Veronica Hayes of the Cook County Circuit Court. My judicial ID and vehicle registration are in plain view on the passenger seat. You may confirm both." The young officer hesitated. The female officer glanced toward the car, but Radford just scoffed. That could be fake. People lie all the time. Being in a suit don't make you special. Veronica's shoulders stayed squared. Your fear does not override my rights, officer. For a beat, no one spoke. Then, from across the street, a voice broke the stillness. That's Judge Hayes. Veronica turned her head slightly. A man in a hoodie stood on the sidewalk, phone raised, recording. Another voice joined his. You got the wrong woman, man. That's a judge. Radford's eyes flicked toward the sound. The narrative he'd started was unraveling faster than he could stitch it together, but his fingers didn't move from the holster. Veronica didn't flinch. She'd been cross-examined by murderers, interrupted by senators, threatened by criminals with everything to lose. But this was different, because this wasn't courtroom drama. This was power without accountability, authority without cause, fear masquerading as procedure. And Veronica Hayes was done being quiet. Officer Molina moved with deliberate calm, her boots clicking softly as she stepped away from the group. She approached the Lexus and leaned slightly, peering through the window without touching the glass. Her flashlight beam swept across the dashboard, illuminating the contents of the passenger seat. A judicial ID with Veronica Hayes' name in embossed gold. Cook County Circuit Court. Photo. Bar number. Next to it, a matching vehicle registration clipped neatly inside a leather folder. Molina stood upright, turned toward the others, and spoke evenly. ID confirms. Registration matches. Her words were clean, final. There was no ambiguity left, but Officer Radford didn't acknowledge her. He didn't budge. His right hand still hovered too close to the butt of his holstered weapon, his jaw clenched like a trap waiting to spring. His eyes stayed fixed on Veronica as if willing her to give him a reason. She gave him none. She hadn't moved, hadn't shouted, hadn't done anything but speak her name and hold her ground. Her calm was no longer passive. It was deliberate. And dangerous, at least to someone like Radford. Then came the shift. Another vehicle approached, sleek, unmarked, rolling to a slow, purposeful stop behind the squad cars. The headlights cast long shadows before flicking off. A door opened, then closed with precision. Lieutenant Robert Lynn stepped out. He didn't walk fast. He didn't bark orders. But every officer on the scene stood a little straighter when he arrived. Lynn was known for two things: no theatrics, and no patience for nonsense. His eyes moved quickly, from Veronica, standing tall with dignity intact, to Molina, still near the car, then finally to Radford, whose stance remained stubborn. "Why?" Lynn asked, voice low and firm. "Are there 3 units surrounding a woman in formal wear with visible judicial ID and no reported violation?" Radford blinked, the words hitting harder than if Lynn had shouted. "She didn't follow my command," he muttered. Lynn didn't look away. "And you didn't follow protocol." A beat of silence, no apology, no justification. But at that moment something broke. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted direction. Radford was no longer in control. Veronica didn't need to raise her voice. The system had spoken for her, finally. The next morning the lake was calm. Just the gentle lap of water against the stones and the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze. Veronica sat on a worn wooden bench near the edge of the park, the same flat still on her feet, though her clothes had changed to something quieter: dark slacks, a cream sweater, her badge tucked into her purse. She had come to clear her head. No cameras, no reporters, just space. She wasn't surprised when Officer Molina approached. The young woman moved with the same quiet steps as the night before, but this time there was no flashlight, no uniform stiffness, just a hesitant kind of grace. She stood in front of Veronica for a moment, unsure whether to sit. Veronica looked up and gave a small nod. Molina sat. For a long stretch, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It had weight, yes, but not the kind that crushed. It waited. Finally, Melina exhaled. I should have said something sooner, on the scene. When I saw your ID, I knew exactly who you were. I froze. I'm sorry. Veronica turned to her, her expression unreadable but not cold. You recognized me, Melina nodded. I took your community justice seminar at Northeastern 2 years ago. You spoke about accountability, about the power of choice in a system built on reflex. It stuck with me. Last night I hesitated. Veronica studied her for a beat. Then she said simply, silence has weight, but so does speaking, even if you tremble. Melina swallowed. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. I trembled. And still you spoke. That matters. They both turned toward the water where a pair of ducks drifted lazily, the world oblivious to the headlines. A few minutes later, a small boy and his mother strolled past on the path behind them. He slowed as they neared the bench, tugging gently at his mom's sleeve. Then, in a stage whisper that carried anyway, he said, "That's the lady who stood still and didn't let them scare her." His mother hushed him softly but smiled as she nodded to Veronica in recognition. Veronica didn't speak. She just smiled, quiet, small, but real. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that remembers and endures. By the next afternoon, Judge Veronica Hayes had gone from a quiet public servant to a national headline. It started as a blurry nighttime video on Reddit. No intro. No commentary, just raw footage. A black woman in professional attire standing beside her car, surrounded by flashing lights and armed officers. Her voice steady as she said, "Your fear does not override my rights." Within hours, the clip exploded across TikTok. Creators stitched it, slowed it down, captioned every word. Some amplified her courage. Others dissected the officer's aggression frame by frame. It was everywhere, Instagram Reels, Facebook reposts, even morning news segments. The hashtag Stand with Judge Hayes trended for 5 straight days. People weren't just sharing her name, they were saying it with purpose. She could have been killed. This is what systemic bias looks like even when you follow every rule. She didn't flinch. That's leadership. Back in Evanston, her quiet neighborhood had become a media hotspot. News vans parked along the curb. Reporters waited outside the courthouse. Anonymous flowers arrived at her door, along with thank you cards written in Sharpie and crayon from middle school students. Then came the mayor's office. A neatly dressed aide arrived at Veronica's door with a neutral smile and a carefully worded letter. It was an offer for a private apology from the mayor and police chief to preserve your dignity and avoid unnecessary escalation. Veronica handed the envelope back, still folded. The disrespect wasn't private, she said without anger. Neither will the apology be. That sentence made the evening news in full. The city, under scrutiny, announced an internal departmental review. Within 3 days, the truth came out. Officer Clint Radford had 2 prior complaints of excessive force. Both involved black drivers. Neither had led to formal discipline. One was unsubstantiated. The other was resolved administratively. The outrage deepened, but it also clarified. Protests began at City Hall, not chaotic but organized. Clergy, lawyers, students, teachers. Veronica didn't attend, but her presence was felt. They carried signs that read, "Still standing." The badge isn't above the law. Respect her robe and her skin. From the rallies and forums, community demands sharpened, mandatory body-worn cameras for all officers with randomized audits. Annual mental health screenings to assess psychological readiness for fieldwork. Ongoing bias training led by independent educators, not internal HR. Public access to officer complaint records with real consequences. The city hadn't just been embarrassed, it had been exposed, and the people weren't waiting for apologies anymore. They wanted action. In the middle of it all, Veronica Hayes did what she had always done. She stood still, not out of fear, but so others could move forward. The auditorium at Northwestern Law was full, though the room held no banners, no dramatic lighting, no podium draped in cloth. Just a simple wooden stage, rows of students, faculty, and alumni, and one woman standing at the center, no robe, no gavel. Only her voice. Veronica Hayes didn't need fanfare. She adjusted the mic, then looked out across the crowd, many of them barely older than her first-year clerks. Some had signs tucked under their seats. Others had phones recording quietly in their laps. But Veronica didn't flinch under the attention. She never had. Justice, she began, doesn't live in a courtroom. It lives in the choices we make when no one is watching. Her voice was calm, but it carried. The room leaned in. I did everything I was taught to do. I pulled over. I kept my hands visible. My credentials were in plain sight. I used calm language. I complied. She let the silence hold that truth, and I was still treated as a threat. A few heads bowed. Others held her gaze, eyes wide. What happened to me isn't rare. What's rare is that someone recorded it, that I had a title people respected, that the truth made it past the shoulder cams and the paperwork. She paused, long enough for the words to settle. We put faith in the system, but forget it's made of people. And people carry bias, fear, ego. The law can be flawless on paper, but it lives, or dies, in human hands. A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the crowd. Then came her final line, not shouted but shaped with intention. Outrage fades. Courage stays. I don't need applause, I need accountability. And yet, applause came anyway, first from the front row, then rising like a wave, louder, stronger, until the entire auditorium was on its feet, hands clapping, some eyes shining. Veronica didn't smile. Not because she wasn't moved, but because she understood something they were just beginning to learn. This wasn't a performance. It was a promise, to herself, to her father, to every person whose silence had once been survival, and now it was a stand. If this story reminded you of something you've seen, don't scroll past. Don't shrug it off. Don't say that's just how things are. Speak up. Share it. Because silence doesn't shield the vulnerable, it shelters injustice. The truth, it doesn't always roar. It doesn't always fight back with fists or fury. Sometimes it stands still. It meets fear with focus. It holds the line when the law forgets its shape. Veronica Hayes didn't ask to be a symbol. She just refused to disappear. If that matters to you, let it move you. Let it start a conversation. Let it echo. Subscribe for more stories that refuse to stay quiet. Because the world doesn't change by accident. It changes when someone chooses to see, and someone else decides they won't look away.